there, I'm Mary Beth Temple for Hooked for Life, and thanks for joining me for another fabulous red heart pattern. In this video, we're going to take a look at the Gray Shades Tartan Crochet Scarf, so click on the link below to download your free pattern, and while you're down there, subscribe to the channel for fresh content weekly on knitting, crocheting, and other yarny stuff. We're going to take a look at some color work. We're going to take a look at the linen stitch, and we're going to take a look at doing some surface crochet. So let's get started on this really cool scarf. I have already completed the first 10 rows because I think this is much easier to see the things that I want to show you when there's some work already done. So basically, this is what we call the crochet linen stitch. And all it is single crochet, chain one, skip the single crochet in the next chain one space. And as you can see, looking at the work, chain one spaces stagger. See, they're here and then they're here, etc. So this is linen stitch. You may have done it before. Some people call it moss stitch. It's a really simple stitch to achieve. The reason I'm starting here in the video, again, I want to talk about the color changes because that is the only part of this pattern that is even the least little bit complex. So, all the time when I'm making these videos, I tell you, you can read the text or you can look at the diagram. I am here to tell you, this one is so much simpler if you look at the diagram. It is so much easier to see what you're doing looking at the color chart than it is to read a mountain of text, because all this text is telling you is you're making the linen stitch, and every time there's a break in the colors, you can see there's not a chain one space in between. So regardless of what color you're stitching, if you look at the chart, these two single crochets that are between every color panel, there's always two single crochets between the color panel. There is never a chain one in there, and that makes it super simple to change colors, which is why it's done that way. It keeps the piece nice and square. So again, if you want to read the text, if you are not a diagram person, I understand. But if there was ever a time when you were going to learn to work from the color chart, now is that time, because it's so much easier to just see what you're doing. So here is the diagram, and here is my sample. Now, we don't generally work in black or white here on camera just because it's too hard for you to see. But you can see there's that would be the black color, and there's my other three on the other side. So I have completed the 10th row, and we're going to go to the 11th row. So the 11th row is here on the chart, or of course you can read it in the text. Just a gentle reminder, odd number rows, you are reading from right to left. Even number rows, you're reading from left to right, vice versa if you're left-handed. So I'm coming up on the end of the 10th row. And I want to talk about the color changes. And again, we're doing the color changes here the same way we do them every time when we have a color change. You can see I have all my little balls of yarn back here waiting for me. I don't need that crochet hook though. Let me get that out of there. When you get to the last stitch of the color that you're going to stop using, you do that last yarn over of the last stitch in the new color. So we're at the end of the 10th row. I'm going to do my last yarn over in the last stitch of the old color with the new color. You can see I've got all my little balls of yarn are all laid out here ready for me to go. I just take a fold about 4 to 6 inches in from the end. I'm not going to tie a knot or anything. I can tighten those stitches up when I weave in the ends. So this is the end of the 10th row. Turn the work and chain one. Single crochet in the first single crochet, that's the very first one. Now I'm going to chain one and skip this single crochet and single crochet in the next chain one space. So I'm going to do that 4 times. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you can see here I have 2 single crochets next to each other. So I'm going to chain 1, skip this single crochet and single crochet in the next single crochet. However, you can see I'm about to change colors. So I'm going to drop that color and I'm going to pick up my new color and join it once again by just pulling up a fold, maybe 4 to 6 inches from the end. Let's see if I can find my end here. Here we go. Last yarn over of the last stitch in the old color is the new color. So I'm going to single crochet in the next single crochet, chain 1, skip 1 single crochet in next chain 1 space 2 times, one, 2, chain 1, skip 1 single crochet in the next single crochet, and once again at the end of this I'm going to change my color. Now let's talk about the color changes a little bit. I'm going to bring it up here and then we're going to talk about it when I do the next row. In the interest of keeping things neat, I like to keep all my color changes to one side. So I always keep the working yarn towards one side of the work. It's the wrong side. It's the side away from me when I'm working these rows. It's the side towards me when I'm working these rows. And I do it because I just think it's neater. And I'm going to give you a couple of tips on keeping those things neat. But for right now, I know that you have the general gist of this. Let me get to the end of the row and we'll talk about those color changes. Doing the end of the 11th row, skip that single crochet in the last single crochet. And you can see that we're changing colors because that's what we're doing on the 11th row. So now the next few rows, we're not changing colors, the colors are the same. So we're going to use each ball of yarn as we come to it. Let's see if I can neatly go up and you can see all my little balls of yarn waiting for me there. I didn't use bobbins or anything fancy like that just because it's a fair amount of stitches in each color. And so I didn't want to get those little plastic bobbins. I don't think they hold enough for a project like this. Now, let's take a look at the 12th row. So this is slightly different. So at the beginning of the 12th row, we're going to chain 1. We're going to single crochet in the first single crochet. Now, in the row that we did before, in the row underneath, there were 2 single crochets next to each other, so we had to skip one, but now there are not 2 single crochets next to each other. There's a single crochet and a chain 1 space. So we're going to go right into that chain 1 space, then chain 1, skip 1, etc. So here we are. We have the last chain 1 space and the last single crochet in the color that I'm working in. So I'm going to put my single crochet in that chain 1 space. Then I'm going to put my single crochet in that single crochet, and I'm changing color, right? Because my next stitch is in a different color. So remember how I said I wanted to keep all the twisting to one side of that work, so I'm going to bring that yarn towards me. Now this is a tail. This is only going to happen on rows in which you change color. I'm going to bring this working yarn up to finish the single crochet. However, to keep it neat, and you don't have to do this, I just do it because I think it's neater. I'm going to finish that single crochet with the new color, and when I do my next one, I'm going to tuck my hook under that float. finish my single, single in the next chain one space, chain one, skip one single crochet, single in the next chain one space. Let's take a look lower down because it's easier to see. If you can see, by doing that on these rows, by going under that little float, it gives you a super neat edge. Now, when I'm going in this direction, when I'm doing my next row, I don't worry about where I just stitch like I normally stitch. But going in this direction, where I have these floats on the side of the work that is towards me, just going under that little float as I go, it makes it so much neater. But again, do you have to do it? You absolutely do not. It's just a little tip that makes your details a little neater. Okay, so there was my last chain one space. Here is my single crochet, bringing the yarn towards me, bringing that new yarn up, finish that single crochet, go to do the next single crochet and put my hook under the float. Then in the chain one space. So the thing that is different between the odd numbered rows and the even number rows is whether there are 2 single crochets at the beginning and end of each color block or 1. All right, so here we are. There's only 1 at the end of this one, but we're making it 2. We're putting 1 in the chain one space and 1 in the single crochet. Now, these stitches are a little bit sloppy, and should you worry about it, you should not, because the reason they're sloppy is because there's tails hanging. When you go back and weave those tails in, you'll neaten that all up. So once again, bring that working yarn towards you, bring the new working yarn up, yarn over, finish the last stitch in the old color, put your hook under the float, do that first single crochet. And that's really all there is to that. And again, when I'm going in the other direction, I don't do anything fancy. I keep the working yarn color changes on this side of the work, which on the alternate rows will be away from me. And I'm not putting my hook anyplace special. I'm just stitching the way I stitch. So I'm going to put just a few more rows on this piece. And then I want to come back and look at the surface crochet. I just want to go over the surface crochet ever so briefly so you can see how that works. But one more time, under that float, just at the very beginning. Oops, don't need a chain there. Just at the very beginning. And once again, you can see how neat that makes it. That does not look any worse on what is technically the wrong side of the work than it does on what is technically the right side of the work. One last little color work note I want to make. On occasion, you will find that there are rows in which you have the same color all the way across. In that case, it makes the most sense to end off the bobbins before you do that row, and here's why. So this row went in this direction. So my next row, when I'm going to want to do color work, is going to go in this direction. And the colors that I'm going to want are on the wrong side. So my working yarn was over here for this color. I would need it here to begin the row. So there's no nice way to trail that far. So it's best to cut, leave a tail to weave in later, and start a new ball of yarn after these single rows. The other thing I just want to point out real quick, and you'll notice it on the chart, on some of these rows that are one color, you'll see that there are 2 single crochets right next to each other, which is where the color change is. Remember how I said there's always 2 singles next to each other at least? And oftentimes they are 2 different colors. But sometimes, depending on where the row is, sometimes there's 4 in a row. It would be, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's very simple to look at that and think you're making a mistake, but you're not. Sometimes there's 2 together, sometimes there's 4 together. It depends on what number row that you're on. So the last thing I want to talk about is the surface crochet. And we're going to do that when your scarf is all the way finished before you put the fringe on. So you're going to grab the color that you need and put a slip knot on your hook, and you're going to find the stitch they tell you to find. But in my case, I'm going to grab this one right here. So you're going to start by attaching your yarn to a chain space at the bottom. So I have my slip knot right here. I'm going to go down in that chain one space. I'm going to yarn over from back to front like I normally would. And I'm not every time going to twist the fabric. I'm doing it so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to bring that yarn through and finish the slip stitch. And I'm going to give that just a little tug to make sure it's anchored well. Now, I want a vertical line. So I'm going to insert my hook in the next chain one space. Let me read what the instructions say. Keeping yarn at back of work, slip stitch into each chain one space in alternate rows above joining space to create a straight vertical line of surface slip stitches to opposite end of scarf. Taking care to slip stitch loosely, that's important. Because we're going basically, so it says alternate rows, so we're going every other row. We're going to go down in this chain one space. And then we're going to skip that single crochet and we're going to go down in this chain one space, and this chain one space, and this chain one space. That's a pretty big jump. So you do want to make sure that you're not pulling your slip stitches super, super tight, because if you do, then the work's going to gather up this way and your scarf is not going to be flowy and pretty. So again, I'm going to flip it over so you can see the back, but you don't have to flip it over every single time. I'm just doing it. So I'm going to go down into the next chain one space. Now look at the back. I'm bringing that yarn back to front like I normally would, pulling it up through the work and through the loop to finish the slip stitch. All right, there's my slip stitch. So I'm going to do that all the way up. It's super easy to lose track and go off in a zigzag, so make sure you stop every once in a while and make sure that you're going straight. Skip the single, go into the next chain one space. Skip the single, go into the next chain one space. Okay, so you see how that's laying flat? It's the same tension as the crochet work. I haven't pulled it too tightly nor too loose. And let's do that a couple more times, and we'll look from the back this time because it's easier to see because I'm up close to the edge. I'm going down into the hole, yarning over from back to front like I always do, pulling it through the work and through the stitch, skipping that single, going into the next chain one space, bringing that yarn over back to front, bringing it through the work and through the stitch. And you're going to do that all the way till you get to the other end, at which point you can cut your yarn here, pull it through, and fasten off. And you're going to do that as many times as the pattern tells you, and that's going to finish off your tartan pattern. So thank you so much for joining me here for the Great Shades Tartan Crochet Scarf. I'm Mary Beth Temple for Hooked for Life. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel for fresh content weekly on knitting, crocheting, and other yarny stuff. And we look forward to seeing you again here real soon. Bye-bye.